Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here for tonight's Hope College Connection Live, our second event of our series this semester, focusing on sports and recreation. My name is Megan Schelt, and I represent the Borchter Center for Calling and Career. We would like to thank the athletic department as well as the kinesiology department for partnering with us tonight for this panel. So we have a lot of amazing alumni lined up to talk tonight. But we know there's so many other alumni that are on the call today, and we want you to be able to participate as well. So how can you do that? We have a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen that you can submit a question. So if you're a student, you're curious, want to follow up with something that an alumni shares, please drop that into the Q&A feature, and we will hope to answer that tonight as well. If you have additional insight or words of wisdom that you want to share with our students at Hope College interested in this profession, we welcome you to drop that information into the chat box you will see at the bottom of your screen. What we do with that information is we collect it, we'll send it with the recording of today's call, and give you all of the resources that you'll need to be successful in this industry. If you're an alumni on the call or even a student, we have a platform also called the Hope College Connection. It's a brand new tool, about a year old, that you can join to make connections. This is a networking tool similar to LinkedIn. So if you're not already signed up for that platform, go ahead and check out connection.hope.edu, and you can get started on mentoring a student or connecting with alumni. With that, I would love to welcome our moderator for tonight's panel, Dr. Chad Carlson. Welcome, Chad.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks, Kate. It's such an honor to be here tonight with you guys, with such a distinguished group of alumni. You know, when I think of Hope College, I have a hard time separating it from sports and athletics. And these people embody some of the work that's done. That's been such good work done at Hope College and beyond. So super excited to be a part of this conversation tonight. We have some distinguished guests. And in order for us to start, I'd like to ask them to share a little bit with us about their background, job, position, and organization. So I'm going to call on each of you guys as we go along here to share for just a moment or so, give our audience a little bit more about you before we get into more questions and answers. So Cassidy, why don't we start with you?
Hey everyone, thanks Dr. Carlson, thanks for having me on this panel. I graduated in 2013, as you can see, and honestly, it feels like just yesterday sometimes that I graduated from Hope. I can't believe it's been this long, but I'm currently the social media and content manager for the NFL Players Association, not to be confused with the NFL. So basically, we are the union that represents all NFL players. So all NFL players are part of the union, and our job is to make sure that they have the safest, best experience that they can while they're in the league, and that we set pro football players up for what they're going to do after football in their next career. So my job is to get our programming and messaging out to our players, PR, communications, all of those things.
Cassidy's all over social media, and we appreciate that. It's good to see all that great work that's being done. Thanks so much. Andy, how about you?
Thanks for the invite tonight. I'm actually a graduate of Mason High School in the Lansing area, and then went to Hope, graduated in 1999. I know I'm in sports, but I had a business major with an accounting emphasis, communications minor. Somehow that turned into sports. I always, when I talk to Hope students, I want to know where they live. So I'll tell you, I was a Phelps guy for 2 years and Van Zon Cottage. And I think I got into sports because of the job I had while I was at Hope. I worked for 4 years in the sports information department at Hope, and sports information is basically the communications and publicity team for the athletic department. So while I was a student, I got to go to Hope athletic events and work with media, write articles, travel with teams. So I spent a lot of hours doing that, but made a lot of connections, and it was a pretty awesome experience. Did the Philly semester, worked for the Flyers and 76ers while there. I was hired by the Michigan High School Athletic Association right out of Hope as their communications assistant. I actually took 2 years off from that to get an MBA at Arizona State University, intern with the Diamondbacks while out there. But now I'm back with the Michigan High School Athletic Association. I'm in my 20th year. I'm in charge of our brand team. So I have a team that We do all of our marketing, merchandise, communications, broadcasting, website content, social media, sponsorship sales, just a bunch of stuff to get our brand out into the world. I'm also our soccer director, and I'm our I'm our student leadership director. So I wear a lot of hats, and I love it. And I'm guessing there's a lot of future coaches and administrators on the call tonight. So I'm excited to work with you in the future. And what the crazy thing is, I still think of myself as a Hope student. It seems like it wasn't that long ago, and somehow I am the oldest person on a panel, and that seems very crazy to me. So very happy to be here tonight.
Age is just a mindset, Andy. We're excited about all your experiences and what you'll be able to share with us. So thanks so much. Hey, Brandon, how about you?
Hey guys, first of all, thanks again for having me. It's great to be able to be a part of this discussion. And I'm Brandon Siakel, graduated from Hope in 2011, and currently I'm a strength and conditioning coach at the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, specifically with our winter sport team. And that team encompasses strength and conditioning, nutrition, sports psychology, physiology, technology, and sports medicine, really to help the winter sport athletes and teams fulfill their individual and collective missions for their competitive seasons and ultimately the Olympic Games. And not only to help facilitate competitive excellence, but also really focusing on the health and well-being of the athletes, not only in their short-term pursuits, but also their long-term life pursuits or after sport.
When you're watching Team USA compete at the Olympic Games, a lot of what goes into it is led by Brandon and the team of experts that are working with these athletes. We're so excited to hear from you today, Brandon. Thanks so much. Jiki, why don't you go next?
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. Super excited to be here. Hope grad myself, 2017. So I'm the youngest on this panel. So I feel like, geez, Andy, like you've got so much experience. So I graduated in 2017, studied business and communication. I also played basketball at Hope. So a little shout out to the women's basketball team for going for yet another perfect season. So back to me. So after Hope, went to Western Michigan, studied sport management for my grad degree. And while I was there, got involved in IM officiating, which turned into MHSAA officiating. Did a slew of internships, my favorite being working with the LPGA for Meyer. And then after that, got involved with GVSU. So that's where I did the bulk of my work in compliance there with the athletics department. So keeping the students eligible, making sure that they're making, progress academically, keeping them out of trouble, keeping our coaches, in line, and then also following bylaws and all the things that go into that. So did compliance for a couple of years at GVSU, and then this summer pivoted into recruitment for Hope College. So doing admissions work out here in Chicago. So I'm in Chicagoland doing admissions, but I have a huge, huge heart for sports and rec, because that is truly where I do a lot of, outside of, my day-to-day. That's where I do a lot of things to, keep busy, get back into athletics. I did some coaching, officiating, all that good stuff. So once the world opens back up fully, looking forward to getting back into it. Thanks.
Well, we're so excited to have you here with us today, Jiki. Appreciate that. Let's stick with another former basketball player, our last panelist, Steve Cramer.
Thanks for having me on. I got my notepad out. I'm ready to learn from all the panelists. I'm excited. I'm fired up. So I know I'm going to take a lot away from this. Thanks for having me on. Graduated in 2007 and I got my degree in education. And if you would have told me in 2007 that I was going to be doing what I'm doing today, I'd have said you're crazy. No way. Like not in the plans. But God's got different plans. I'm a Christian. I'm a husband. I'm a father. And I got a passion for what I do. I absolutely love my job. I'm going in my 8th year of running my own business, and we'll dig into some of the details. But essentially, I help players and programs and coaches do what they do, just better when it comes to basketball. And so we can get a lot of details of how I do some of those things. But I'm excited to be on here and see what this next year has in store for all of us.
Well, we're excited to have you here with us today, Steve. I appreciate that. And I want to stick with you here as I get into the next question for you guys. I think it's important that we get a chance to hear what all you guys do day to day. So you told us the big picture. What is it that you do? What's your title, your organization? But what does a day look like in the life of Steve Cramer, who runs Cramer basketball?
And it's intimidating when you ask it that way. So it's a good question because it changes depending on the year. That's one of the reasons why I really like my job, is because throughout the course of the year, I'm not always doing the same thing. So I started Cramer basketball in 2014. I got my degree in education. After I came back from overseas, I was in education for 2 years. I was coaching high school basketball, and I started running basketball camps and doing basketball lessons on the side. And the demand got big enough that I was like, hey, I told my wife, I was like, I think I could do this for a full-time job. Like, I think people like me enough that I could do that. And so in 2014, I was like, all right, let's see if, the dream can be a reality. And so here we are. But essentially during the summer, I travel all over the place around the country. I run basketball camps. I work with high school basketball programs, other events. During the fall and the spring, I will do some of that, but more on a weekend basis. And that's where I'm a little more home base. I live in Myrtle Beach. Most of my business is in the Midwest. And that's a kind of a benefit of my job, is the fact that if I can travel, I can essentially live wherever I want. My wife is a professor at Coastal Carolina down here. And then in the winter, we work with youth basketball programs, a little bit of training. And then that's when I do consulting for high school basketball coaches specifically. So I consult with players and coaches, especially during their basketball season, to help them essentially be more successful and win some more games. During the pandemic, it's very specific. I have a daughter who's 2 years old and she's health compromised. COVID, we're scared of her getting it. Okay. She can't get it. She's tiny. She has achondroplasia and a bunch of health issues. So essentially up at 4:30, Bible, read, pray till 5. I work from about 5 to 7:30. From about 7:30 to noon, it's daddy daycare while my wife is trying to work from home because she can't go on campus and teach. From about noon to 3, sleeping, and I'm working again. And then from 3 to dinner time, it's okay, hey, daddy's here and my other daughter's home and we're working with her. And then in the evening, I'm working for a little bit again. And then I get to hang out with my wife for a couple hours. And then I go to bed and do it all over again. That's the day. It's like planned down to the minute at this point.
That's the day. That's exciting.
And I love it.
That sounds overwhelming all at the same time. We appreciate what you're doing. I think our audience will get a chance to see the courage that you've had to be entrepreneurial in what you're doing and to be able to really step into some of your passions. So appreciate you sharing about that. Jiki, I wonder if you'll share with us a little bit about the life of a compliance officer, the life of a recruiter, sort of both of these realities you've experienced over the last year.
Yeah, Chad, one interesting thing about them is that they are drastically different when it comes to how a student approaches you. So when I'm a compliance officer, it's like, ooh, don't want to go to that office. And as a recruiter, it's like, hey, let's talk about hope, So I've had the best of both worlds. So in compliance, it's all about forming those relationships so that students are comfortable coming to you with really anything. So when it comes to academics, making satisfactory progress, staying on top of students that way. The day in the life, it depends on what the season is. So early in the academic year, you've got bigger teams, right? Football, you've got your track, cross countries, volleyball starting off before the academic year begins. So you're in the office, getting everyone clear, ready to go in August, July through August is a lot of that. And then, that first semester, fall, housing everyone's progress, scholarships, is that all set? Financial aid, is that, satisfactory? Any glitches there? In the winter time, slow it down a bit actually, but you're also gearing up for another season of sports. So picking up again. And then in the fall, it's championship seasons and things of that sort. So, compliance isn't just being in the office, running, reports and things of that sort, but it's also helping out marketing, helping out coaches. So did a lot of work, working events. GVSU, they also hosted a ton. If you're not familiar with, GVSU Division II athletics, really, really big, really, really successful. So they host a lot of championships, which is also great because you get that, you know, events experience as well. So, and then pivoting over to my recruitment side with Hope, this is really awesome because you can actually understand the other needs that students have, especially student athletes, right? So student athletes, like recruiting them, coaches are like, yeah, sport. But then they don't want to mention the coach like, hey, I really want to go somewhere that has a bomb engineering program. So like, can you talk to me about your engineering program? So kind of, you know, balancing that portion because, you know, a former student athlete, but also did some coaching and, you know, I know Mo, so I know Mo's all about, you know, getting the best athletes, right? So knowing what coaches are wanting, but also like having that balance of what students are wanting as well. Just it's pretty interesting to see that as well. So yeah, the day in the life, it's never the same every day in recruitment, but in compliance, it's a lot of, I don't want to say damage control, but, you know, preventative action and just staying on top of your students.
When Jiki mentioned a bomb engineering program, I'm pretty sure she meant a really good one as opposed to an engineering program that creates bombs. I don't think we want those types of students. I hope that is what you meant, correct?
The best engineering program, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That's great. Yep, the life of a prospective student, right? You're figuring it out. That's awesome. Brandon, share a little bit about what you're doing day to day, working with athletes, setting up programming, having people come in and out of the center.
Yeah, absolutely. It's right now with COVID, it's a little bit different with all the protocols as everybody is undertaking right now. But from a normal day-to-day standpoint, I think the biggest thing that I'd like to get across to all the listeners is just like the team approach that needs to happen within the setting that I'm in, within the sport performance world. Yeah, I'm in strength and conditioning, but we do have, as I mentioned earlier, a team of folks that's within the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, but also outside of the committee. For instance, if there are athletes who may utilize a lot of our what we call service providers that branch across many different disciplines, such as like the nutrition, psychology, strength and conditioning, sports medicine, etc. But also there are athletes who they may have their own private dietitian and contracted out sports psychologist, and maybe I'm part of the USOPC, but working with them as their strength and conditioning coach and working with that team of individuals to help facilitate that specific athlete's needs and visions going forward. So there's a lot of different teams involved and team amongst teams, for lack of a better term, and working cohesively together with those individuals is absolutely paramount. And that's what I spend a lot of my day-to-day doing, is working with those individuals on planning, on reflecting, on adapting, talking with the coaches and the athletes on where they're at in their process, where they're at in the training day, and making tweaks. Because when we're putting programs together, it's ultimately a very good collaborative and educated hypothesis, but we all know that hypothesis may not go as planned like 99% of the time. So the communication and collaboration amongst that team from the day to day is definitely paramount in order to make the positive adaptations so that athlete's process continues to go in the right direction for the outcome that they ultimately would like to achieve. And is it easy? Absolutely not. Do we fail at that communication process and at that collaboration? And are we siloed at times? Absolutely. Do we need to check ourselves? Yes, and continue to improve. But that's what it is a lot of the year with that collaboration and teamwork.
This was in the spring of 2016. Coach Becky Schmidt and I took some students to the USOPC in Colorado Springs, and we got a chance to meet with Brandon. He showed us around, and it was interesting to see. You're not just hanging out in the strength and conditioning area, I mean, for all day, like one might expect, right? There's a lot of team building stuff. So I appreciate you saying that, Brandon. Andy, talk to us about a day in the life. I know the last 12 months have been considerably different. There's heightened interest in decisions the MHSA is making and the publicity it's sending out. Share with us a little bit about what that's been like, and then maybe in more normal circumstances, what's a normal day like?
there is no normal day. In a normal year, there's no normal day. Kind of like that. We're doing different things every day. And maybe I'd normally answer in kind of a bigger picture format, but maybe I'll take a different tack this time and answer and tell you exactly what I did today. Just kind of show that, you know, you work in a small office, we have 25 people in our office, people wear many, many hats. And so this might give you an idea of the breadth of activities that can happen in one day. And this was today. So we have a number of winter state championship tournaments coming up here in the next few weeks, up until April 10th. And we are still making decisions on where some of those games will be played. So late there, about 5:30, we made an announcement, for instance, that we're having half of our state semifinal basketball games will be played at Van Andel Arena. And we're making this decision that, again, we're 4 weeks away from this event. So making an announcement, we're working with staff to fine tune those plans, whether it be for the audio or video broadcast of the games, the logistics of the event, the timing of the event. We had a press release to write for this event. We had ticket plans. So there's just a lot that goes into, and then just basketball. That was just basketball. We also changed our cheer championships and wrestling championships today too, all based on changing orders from the government. So that's one big thing. And that it was today, but that's also, it seems like it's been every week for about the last 9 months. We have contingency plans, we tear them up, we make new contingency plans, tear those up, and that happens over and over again. Because of the time we live in, we have gone into a digital tickets at all rounds of our tournament. And this is brand new this year. So this is something that I've been tasked with. So we've been working with all of our district level hosts on their ticket plans for their team wrestling tournament or for their cheer districts, for their bowling regionals. There are tickets to that. So we're working on that today. Our soccer director, I had multiple calls about parents who don't want their kids to wear masks and officials who don't want to wear masks themselves. So all these things are kind of happening one after another, and you have to be ready to change gears. I'm also kind of our staff nerd, and I mentioned bowling earlier, I created these scoring Excel files that all of our bowling regionals use. So those got finalized and sent out to schools today. We also seed our basketball tournament now using a computer formula that I helped create. So I had 2 different interviews with reporters on NPR and the seeding that's coming. So the crazy thing is, none of this I got out of a textbook at Hope. It's just something you kind of learn on the fly. And certainly when I was at Hope, I never would have thought any of those things would be something I'd be doing in a day in life. But that was today in a nutshell.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot. It sounds like an interesting day as well. We've got press releases, we've got all this other stuff going on. I did hear in there, though, maybe that you divulged some information that you might not have wanted to get out in the public, that you're responsible for the seedings, the seeding software.
Yeah, so if there are coaches listening and they either love me or hate me, but yeah, that was a big change for us to go to a computerized formula for seeding our basketball districts. We did that last year was the first year we did it.
Well, I'm sure there's never a dull moment in what you're doing. Thanks. Cassidy, how about a day for you?
Yeah, I relate a lot to you, Andy, in wearing multiple hats and also not knowing what is going to come next. I'll give you a similar picture because we are in the middle of our event season. So we like to say off season is our on season at the NFLPA because it's really the only time that we have to actually capture our players when they're not in the middle of the season and super busy. So it's actually our time to grab them. We have our annual Board of Representatives meeting happening right now. So each of the 32 teams has a rep and 3 alternates. And today I was doing player interviews starting at 9 a.m., had player interviews back to back until about 1. We had a 3-hour meeting. During that meeting, I was chopping up video, taking pictures, making sure that I was getting communication from our legal team about resolutions that were being passed to put into emails and text messages that we would then send out to our executive committee so they can make decisions about yes or no to some of the resolutions that were happening. And then after that, had a few other player interviews. I'm here now and I've got another one happening at 9 o'clock tonight. So the past 3 days, we're going to get about 30 guys in interviews in 3 days. And so it's a lot. I think, you know, what's been really cool about my experience at the NFLPA is that I also never knew, I mean, I graduated it with a communications major and creative writing minor, and I kind of came out of Hope at the time when social media wasn't huge, but it was kind of just starting. And it was something that I found myself really interested in and really passionate about. And so I started off interning, moved down to Indianapolis, worked for the Colts in their marketing department. They didn't even have a social media team at the time. It was a group of people in the digital department that all kind of just threw things on Twitter and threw things on Instagram when they felt like it. So I actually kind of took over their social media while I was an intern and said, hey, I'm interested in this. I want to learn more. Then I ended up working directly for a player. So I got to see the player side of things. I managed his social media, his events calendar, all the appearances that he was doing in the community. So had to switch from the team side and speaking as a team to then speaking as a player who obviously acted very different than I did myself, but I was that person's voice in the digital space. And now being on the union side, I feel like things have really come full circle because I've been able to see all the different touch points that NFL players have. I know how teams approach them. I know how they think, how they act and see their day to day. And now I'm able to use that information to help us inform, hey, when do we talk to these athletes? Do we put stuff out on social media? Are they going to see it? Should we email them? Are they just going to delete it right away? Should we send them a text message? What's the best way to get this information across? And I think, you know, for us, a lot of people don't know that even if you're in communications, you have to touch every single part of your organization. You have to know everything that's going on. So I have to know what legal is doing. I have to know what our licensing team is doing. I have to know what our programming team is doing and what they're offering, because I have to promote all of those programs to players and do it in a way that's not only correct, but also try to make it enticing for them. When you try to talk to 23-year-old millionaires about saving money and about their finances and why they shouldn't buy 3 cars, it can be challenging to get that point across sometimes. So it's constantly coming up with creative ways to grab their attention, to build relationships with them. And that's been honestly the most fun part about my job is trying to come up with those different creative ways to reach them and be able to tell their stories, because a lot of players do really incredible things off the field, and being able to tell and share those stories to kind of show that they're more than the sport they play, they're more than athletes, they have so many different interests off the field. That's really what I'm passionate about and what I care about. So having a small role to play in sharing those stories is pretty cool.
I noticed recently that there's been a few promotions that you've shared on social media related to some of that. Let's get to know these athletes a little bit and something about them beyond football. So to the panelists, we have some questions coming in from the audience already, as we expected. Really exciting. What you guys have shared is clearly resonating with people. Before I get to the next question, there's one follow-up for you, Cassidy. You mentioned player interviews. What are the types of things you're discussing in those player interviews?
Totally. It depends on the time of year. It depends on the project. So today we're actually asking them what it's like to be a player rep, what it's like to be kind of that voice between their locker room and the union. Player reps have a really important role to play because a lot of the things that we discuss as a union, they need to relay back to their team. So right now we're talking about off season. Are they going to have OTAs? Are they going to be virtual? Are they going to be in person? Are we going to have a preseason? And these are all things that need to be negotiated with the league before they can happen. But players have to have their voices heard. So we were talking to reps today to ask them, hey, how do you connect with your locker room? Why do you think it's important to be a rep? Why should other guys care about the stuff that we talk about? Last year, we did some really cool promotions in the social justice space. So we actually got to talk to players about what initiatives that they were working on. We talked to some guys who did sit-ins, went to their local police departments, had conversations there, guys who were getting out in their community, impacting laws that were actually being made. And we just wanted to know more about what they were passionate about and how we could share those stories and amplify what they cared about. So we did player interviews just to talk about that, and honestly just to be a listening ear so that they could share their stories, and then we could then, you know, show the world the great stuff that they're doing. And they've been able to impact a lot of change. I think a lot of times, you know, we see players as, especially the NFL, are they going to kneel? Are they not going to kneel? What does that mean? What are all the consequences of that? And actually getting players to say, hey, this is why I chose to kneel, or this is why I chose not to kneel. And also to see that there's over 2,000 active players at a given time, that there's so many different voices and so many different opinions, and that's okay. We can have differences of opinions and we can choose what we want. So it was really cool to be able to hear those stories.
Well, fascinating issues that you're dealing with these players, and certainly stuff that hits us in the public light. So I appreciate you sharing about that. So the next question that I want to ask to any of you that would like to answer, I'm going to call on the first person here, but the question is, what's the single most important skill you need to be successful in your job? Obviously, all of our panelists are multi-talented, multi-skilled, and there's probably a lot of things they could share. But if you can narrow it down to maybe one thing that's most important for you to be successful, what would that be? And I wonder, Brandon, if you can start us off with this one. What's one important skill you need to be successful in your job?
Yeah, sure. I don't have a specific word per se, but definitely within my job, it's building. I guess it is a word, building trust. You've got to build trust, and if I'm a strength and conditioning coach, or anybody working with an athlete or a coach team specifically, making sure that when we're going in there to help facilitate better processes of the processes that they're currently on is to really just sit back and look at the path that's really already worn, instead of going in and trying to create a whole new path. Even though the research may say create the whole new path, or what you learned, all of your expertise says it needs to be a new path. Not necessarily, because that could totally drive people away. And so trying to look at the path that is already worn and see if you can make that path a little bit more efficient. And once you start getting buy-in, start creating new paths off of that path. But it takes a little bit of time.
Well, thanks for sharing about that. You know, Brandon is dealing with athletes coming in and leaving, coming for periods of time, at least before COVID. And so there's this trust built up right at their home base with who they're working with. And then you're coming here as someone new. So that trust seems to be so important. Yeah, I appreciate that answer. Steve, do you have an answer to this question for us? An important skill.
It's not specifically one skill. I think if you're looking for some great skills, read some of the John Wooden books. He has a ton of great stuff in there. But in a more roundabout way, I would ask you, do you know who you are and what you want to stand for? And if you have an idea of who you are and what you stand for, then ask yourself, what are your beliefs? What are your behaviors? And what are your attitudes going to look like on a day-to-day basis? And so if I can understand myself and who I am and what that should look like and what those characteristics embody, now when I got myself down, now I can go out into the world and see, okay, where do I find purpose? Where do I find passion? And where can I find the people that I can serve? And now that's automatically gonna put me into a direction, a road that I can start to travel down and be successful.
I appreciate that answer. Yeah, a lot of wisdom there, learning from others. That's great. Any other panelists want to answer this question? Important skills.
I guess I'll jump in. You know, I think a lot of sports organizations are small, so you have to be multi-talented. You have to be a self-starter. But I think the simple answer for me is just being able to communicate. And that sounds obvious, but you need to be able to write emails. You need to be able to, in my case, write rules books, write guides for people and simple terms that can help effectively communicate something. You need to be able to speak, not only speak to public groups, but to speak to staff to be order to kind of sell your ideas, convince people. So I think very simple is just communicate.
I love hearing that. As the director of general education here at Hope College, we assume that there's soft skills that students will be needing, and you guys are here voicing that in reality. So appreciate that. I want to ask the next question to Jiki first, and I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about how you got into the field of compliance first, and what it was like during your grad program, and then working at Grand Valley. What were your entry paths, and what were the barriers to that?
Love this. So coming into the beginning of my second year of my grad program, I was coming off of like a really great internship with Meyer, but knew like I wanted to get my feet soaked into somewhere more than a semester long, right? So I just asked around, and I'm going to name drop here Walter Moore. Just has been a huge support for me, knowing that I was in this quest to like get into athletics. So at the time he was coming out of the compliance role at GVSU. I just shot him an email, right? So we're going to talk about this later, right? Like, how do you get connected? So I shot him an email and just said, hey, would love to just talk with you, get some coffee. Sure enough, we met for coffee, and he said, you know what? I'm coming out of this role, but you know, the female that's coming into it, she could use some help maybe. So I'll talk with her. Sure enough, I met with Erica at the time, and I was just going into this, you know, completely voluntary. I wasn't expecting to get paid. I just knew that I needed to like get my feet soaked in somewhere, and kind of spread my experience into more than 3 months. So come to find out, they actually had a position for me, which just turned into a specialist position, and that turned into 2 years. But first and foremost, I got into it knowing that internships, while, you know, even in grad school, right? Internships are great, but there comes a time where you want to be able to pull together all those internships that you have and really, you know, expand on that. So even though I knew that I didn't have a surefire position that was coming towards me, that, you know, full time, I was gonna get paid, all that good stuff, benefits, I just knew that I had to get into somewhere. So first and foremost, like, just be open to saying yes. And early in your career, be open to just don't expect everything all at once. You know, Andy kind of said, this is a field where you might wear many hats. That's because there's probably a lot of money in that entry level position that you're in. So you got to just be comfortable, you know, maybe go into a field where you won't get all like the glam and glitz that engineering student did when he came out of, you know, Hope. But at the same time, that for me turned into, you know, a position, actually 2 years, and then a lot of great connections, a lot of just skills that I was able to hone in and expand on as well. So carrying those into my position now, I think back to, you know, and I always talk to Walter, just saying like, you were able to just kind of pull me into this position. And so always having, you know, those folks in your corner, definitely continue to reach out, and then follow up and just say thank you, because you never know what that will turn into.
That's great advice. Say yes and say thank you. How cool that is, and how simple. We have questions coming in from the audience here, and one of those is, I think, to sum up a couple different questions. We have Hope College students in the audience that are sitting here as Hope College students thinking, how do I get from where I am right now to where you guys are right now? What are the steps I need to take, specifically some of the early steps? And so I wonder if you guys can reflect on some of your early steps post Hope College, and also maybe from your point of view right now, where you are, what you would suggest to some of these students as first steps they might take. Cassidy, do you mind leading us off with this one?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I took an interesting path out of Hope because as I graduated and all of my peers were taking full-time jobs, I actually took an internship. I worked 65 hours a week and I made minimum wage for the first year and a half out of Hope. So there was a little bit of a, did I make the right choice? Am I doing this right? I feel like I should have done this earlier. But my internship experience was invaluable because I got to see so many different areas of the business and network with other people. I think, you know, we always like to compare ourselves to what our peers are doing, especially right after graduation. And it's really important to know that the journey you are on is your journey. I never in a million years would ever imagine that I'd be in the seat that I'm in today. I didn't even know the NFLPA existed at that point. So I think it's just so important to run your race and find your interests. The internship experience was really helpful. Even after that, I still struggled finding a full-time thing. So I put myself out there. I tried to find areas and people that I knew in those areas. And I just reached out, similar to what Jiki said, I just reached out to have conversations with people. And a lot of times it was an informal, just me asking them what they did. And then that turned into me being able to build a relationship with that person. So I sat down with the director of player engagement at the Colts when I was an intern. And I said, hey, I'm interested in building brands and social media. Do you know any players who have foundations that might need help? I can help on the side. I can, do social media marketing on the side while I'm doing this internship. And he was like, let me ask. And sure enough, he came back to me about a month or so later and said, hey, I've got a player in mind who's starting a foundation. He could use your help. So just kind of putting yourself out there, identifying people that you're interested in. If you see, no matter what career it is, if you see somebody that's doing something you think, hey, I might like to do that, reach out and ask them, and don't go into it asking them for a job or asking them to look at what you do, but reverse it and go into asking them questions and what they do and what they're challenged in. And then one of the best pieces of advice I got from one of my grad professors was, after you talk to these people, ask them for 3 more people that you should talk to. So if I sat down with somebody who was in a position that I thought was cool, once I got done, I said, hey, thank you so much. Is there anybody else that is in a similar position that you think I should talk to as well? Can you connect me with them? And sure enough, they would send me at least 1 or 2 more people that I should meet. And that really helped me.
Oh, what a great bit of advice. I love hearing that. Yeah. Andy, can you speak to that one too?
Yeah, so definitely had a number of internships and small jobs and volunteer experiences, which no one was telling me at the time, but now I tell people to do. It's this networking that everyone in sports hears over and over, but it is really important. And I think Jiki and Cassie are both said that. But so one thing I found with the number of positions I had early on, and Cassie's also right that there's not much money for most sports jobs right out of the chute. You can work into that. But one thing I found myself doing as I was trying to find what I liked, because this sports industry is so huge, much bigger than any of us realize, and certainly than I realized when I was at Hope. But I was finding the things I liked, but maybe more importantly, I was finding the things I didn't like at all. And I was crossing them off the list. Like, don't want to do that experience again. So I was finding things I liked. I was crossing things off in order to find what I was really passionate about. And it ends up being, a lot of my friends were like, they wanted to work in big college sports or professional sports. And I loved high school sports. I loved everything about high school sports. And to follow up, one other thing, you heard Cassie and Chiki both mention that they sat down with someone for coffee. I think you guys all have a great opportunity right now, because from my seat, I get people, well, before COVID, a lot of people would contact me and want to have, to pick my brain about jobs and all that, and internships and career path, and which I would do. But from my seat, it was a lot of, it's work. It's an hour, maybe more than that, to set that up. But Zoom has changed everything. And if someone emailed me and said, hey, can I schedule you for 15 minutes and pick your brain and ask you a few questions, I would do that in a heartbeat. It'd be easy. I don't have to leave my desk. So I would tell you all to reach out to folks and just ask for 15 minutes. And maybe it turns into more. And maybe you don't get a job out of it, but they'll remember you the next time when a job opens up, or when your resume comes across their desk. So I think Zoom has changed this networking piece quite a bit.
That's a great answer too. I appreciate that. And that's probably a good segue into the next question we're getting from the audience here. I want to ask this to Brandon and Steve specifically, and we'll have Steve start with this one. We've seen a lot of changes over the past 12 months, and you two guys specifically are working with athletes, coaches, other people that are performing in the sport industry. How has your approach shifted? How have you innovated your approach to working with these other people over the past 12 months? And how much of that do you see yourself continuing to do even after the pandemic has scaled back?
We're playing this game. Okay, I'll go first. So I'll totally upfront, not hiding anything from you guys. Most of my business is face-to-face working with people. So when gyms closed and schools closed, guess what happened to my business? Bomb, like destroyed, right? And so for me, I had already set up an online training program. So since 2017, I've been working with players online. That was a big benefit for me. when COVID hit and I couldn't get into the gym. The fact that we were already doing a lot of some of the virtual workouts and things like that with players, those just got ramped up. In fact, we moved into a house where we need to get a new floor put in. So right now we have like a polished concrete floor. So we moved everything out of my living room, and I did this for the month of January. And MHSA, you guys know this really well. So I was like doing workouts with players and coaches and all this stuff because they couldn't get into the gym yet. And so, out of 31 days in January, about 31 days, I'm on my living room floor, dribbling a basketball on the concrete, doing drills with kids from around the country. But during this time, as much as it hurt my business financially, there's some things that happened that I'm definitely going to continue. And it was different ways to use technology. We went from an online training program to a basketball training app for players and coaches to use. That wouldn't have been up and running probably unless COVID hit. It would have been a little bit longer. We started a program called the Coach's Edge, which was already in the works for a couple years. That got sped up because COVID hit, and I had a lot more time to dedicate to that. So as much as 2020 has absolutely sucked in so many ways, you got to figure out a way to roll with the punches. And so for me, being able to do consulting digitally, virtually, we've been able to do that and actually start new branches of my business with consulting and coaches memberships because of the pandemic. So that's definitely something that we're going to keep as we start to bring back some of the in-person training more so in 2021.
That's great. That's great. Thanks for sharing. Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, Steve said it really well in terms of rolling with the punches and having to adapt continuously during this time. And I mean, luckily, prior to 2020, there were a slew of athletes who I did do virtual training with, and we set that up just because they're spread out around the country, and maybe there wasn't a competent strength and conditioning coach in their area. So we'd set it up virtually, making sure that they had the infrastructure, meaning equipment and facility to support the training needs. And then making sure that we're going over the training plan and all of that stuff and do FaceTime workouts. We did FaceTime at that time. We didn't do Zoom. And so that transition of kind of practicing it for years prior really helped that transitional process. For the athletes who were more at training centers or had normally been with strength and conditioning coaches where I had maybe provided the program and other coaches were implementing it, or they were with a strength and conditioning coach who I was just collaborating with and kind of facilitating any other needs. That was a little bit more different, where if we had access to outside, we'd go and do outside training. And if we did have, and we've had the means to and the budget to order the necessary equipment for some of these athletes who had been in a weight room at the training center, for instance, who then didn't have access just at that time due to COVID. So there were a lot of adaptations and figuring out how to go about doing that. But we figured it out with outdoor training, virtual training, and then just communicating with the strength and conditioning coaches in the other areas to make sure that they had the equipment that was needed, but most importantly, in a safe manner to carry out the training. But definitely a lot of adapting.
A lot of adapting. It sounds like you guys both heeded Jiki's advice before you even heard it, to say yes to things, right? We're going to figure this out. So we're going to say yes. And one of the things that my students and I learned at the USOPC when we were there is that the bold get the gold, right? The bold are the ones who are willing to step into new experiences and new things. And they're the ones that are rewarded for doing so. I appreciate you sharing that, Brandon. One thing that you five all have in common that we're so proud of is that you were undergrads here at Hope. And one of the questions coming in is, what of your undergraduate experiences have helped you in what you're doing now? I know a lot of you mentioned that you're figuring this thing out as you go, right? We don't have a sports management, sports studies program at Hope. We have courses that are maybe related to what you're doing, but so much of it is learning on the go, learn on the fly, your ability to adapt and all this. But Can you pinpoint certain things within your experiences at Hope as an undergrad that you found helpful to you in what you're doing now? And I wonder if, Jiki, you can start us off on this one. I'm going to ask you because you're the most recent graduate, and then that'll give some of the older folks a chance to a chance to fulfill their memories and then speak into this after you're done.
Okay, Chad said that on me. Okay, so first and foremost, like I'm gonna take my admissions hat off and just talk. I can't begin to talk about just the amount of experiences that you gain as a student at Hope. I mean, yeah, we can talk about the liberal arts education, your actual academic majors, and like how deep you can get into those, but just the experiences. I first of all found myself going into a grad program where I felt extremely equipped, extremely. I felt like, yeah, we read this book already, or we talked about, these types of theories already and those types of things. But again, just, academically, just preparedness, like it was there, but also experiences. So thinking about internships and all those great things. Going to Melinda and Squeenie and just saying, hey, can I do an internship here with y'all? Sure, we got some stuff for you to do. Okay, great. Working in events, and those all transferred over into what I was doing at Western. I actually, before I got to Western, was doing some broadcasting things at the comm major. So, did ESPN3 at Western for the women's basketball team, right? So just like being prepared to just kind of do whatever comes your way. I have found that to be the difference as a Hope grad. I'm around a bunch of other grads. At Western with other grad students that came from other schools, and just being able to recognize and just see the difference of the preparedness and the experiences that I had were pretty big. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Amidst all these really insightful answers, I want to make sure everybody in the audience is aware of the conversations going on in the chat. Some very helpful answers and suggestions from alumni there as well. Thanks. Cassidy, can you speak to some undergrad experiences at Hope and how they've impacted what you do now?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with what Jiki was saying about the experiences and opportunities. I think, especially in the communications field, I spent a lot of time in the comms building, getting experience with videography, photography. We did a lot of broadcasting for the Hope basketball team. And so I actually got to practice going down and being a sideline reporter, which I thought I, would maybe want to do at that time. And so having that beautiful comms room and to have the green screens and learn about all the equipment, I mean, honestly, it's really invaluable experience that you might not be able to get other places. And there could be a huge competition. So I felt like I really got to learn so many different pieces that have helped me now. And the other thing too that I think is a huge difference, and you hear this all the time, but having smaller classes with professors who actually care about you was huge for me, because I actually spent my first year of undergrad at a bigger school and transferred to Hope. And the one-on-one, what my professors were able to help me pour into me was so helpful and so valuable that honestly at bigger schools, it was kind of like I was just a number to those professors. And now I think I see such a different side of servant leadership and what that actually means. It's very interesting when you get into a field and you're in an organization where you can just tell different people's styles of leadership. And I think what Hope really helped to teach me was actually caring about other individuals as people. We get so easily caught up in our day-to-day and all of the tasks that we're doing, but you can tell when people care about you, when they want to help you succeed, when we're all kind of cheering each other on, especially in this last year when things got really rough for everybody. To be around a team that was actually caring about you and actually wanting to work together, that was a mindset that I learned at Hope. I learned that from my professors, from having them care about me. And I think that that's invaluable because people recognize that, and you stand out in a room when you treat people like they're humans. And that was really, really helpful for me.
I love seeing when you're posting on social media, Cassidy gets responses oftentimes from Hope professors who are still connected with her. Such a cool thing about the caring relationship there. So I want to go to Brandon on this one next. Brandon needs to sign off a few minutes earlier than the rest. We plan on going to 8:15, but Brandon, in your last couple of minutes, can you speak to some experiences as an undergrad at Hope that have served you and what you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll specifically really touch on the exercise science department. And few of the others on this panel have mentioned that they felt very prepared going into graduate school. I can second that. Going into graduate school, just from the curriculum that the exercise science department put together, I thought that progression really facilitated the preparations for higher education moving forward. And so that really helped out in a lot of ways. I also think that the athletic department at Hope, I ran track for 4 years at Hope, played football for 2 years, and just having those experiences, especially in the field that I am now, working with coaches and athletes, there's kind of a mutual respect around like, oh, you went through this type of similar process that we may be going through, and you're coaching us in these types of things, which I've found to be a benefit. And I wasn't, as a collegiate athlete, I was not good enough to get a scholarship at D2 or D1. So having the opportunity to play at a Division III collegiate setting has really helped in my current career. And then lastly, I would say just the content of everything that I had learned within the exercise science department, because it was such a holistic approach. I mean, I had exercise physiology to anatomy, but also with Dr. Sears in nutrition and Coach Schmidt in sports psychology, and then taking research methods, all biomechanics, all of these different things that I can honestly say within 1 week, every week of my current role, I'm going in some aspect of all of those different realms, from the foundation that was laid at Hope College, using those quite often. And I just can't, I guess, thank the staff and the department enough for putting together a curriculum that really did facilitate the knowledge base for higher education, and also in the preparation for where I am today.
Well, we appreciate your response, Brandon. We appreciate your time tonight. Thanks so much for being with us. We're so proud of what you're doing, and wish you all the best. So
Yeah.
appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Of course, and thanks for having me. And if any current students, alumni have any questions, I think you have my email address, so feel free to reach out. And it was a pleasure to speak with you all, and also just be on this panel with the others. So thank you.
It's a good group. Thanks, Brandon. We do have your contact information. They will contact you. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. I want to transition to a question in the Q&A, and this one has to do with maybe less about sport specifically and more about recreation and the pipelines between recreation and sport. I want to ask this one to Andy and Steve to hear some of your thoughts on barriers to entry into the sports and recreation. And I'm specifically thinking about Leah's question here about equity and barriers to participation. You both are working with athletes and a part of organizations in different ways, of course, but one of the big issues within sport, as we see the youth sport industry shifting to a more privatized model, what are some things that you are seeing happening in relationship to equity and decreasing barriers for access in sports? Andy, why don't you start out with this one?
Are we talking from a jobs perspective or participation perspective?
I think I would like you to respond from your perspective as someone on behalf of the MHSAA. What's going on, maybe from an organizational standpoint, systematically, what's happening?
Sure. And so this is more a participation question for me, and this is our constant battle, is showing why school sports are important, and why they are important to communities, and why they should be funded, and we talk about this all the time. This is the story. We try to tell stories every day, and it's the story of the importance of school sports. So this is less of a rec answer. So what we battle is those folks who are going outside of the schools for opportunities. Not that there's nothing wrong with AAU basketball, for instance. Those are great participation opportunities, but there's a different kind of participation opportunity for athletes. The things that you learn that coaches are teaching, the teacher coaches are teaching at practices are different maybe than what you're doing if you're playing a statewide, Midwest-wide summer schedule. Same thing with soccer. The soccer is a good example. It's very expensive to play year-round club soccer, and there's some folks that are focusing in on that. So we're constantly trying to tell the story of why school sports are important, and trying to stay almost in some ways relevant. We know that a lot of students are getting their college scholarships from their club opportunities, from their AAU opportunities, and that's fantastic. But 99% of our kids are not going to be playing in college. So we need to make sure that we have safe opportunities, sportsmanlike opportunities that emphasizes scholarship in the classroom, those kind of things that keep high school sports, that make high school sports so important.
That's great. Thanks. Steve, you might have a different perspective, not an incompatible one, but a different perspective on this one with the work that you're doing.
I love high school sports compared to AAU, to be honest with you. I don't want to get into or offend anyone. And there's a whole lot of things that we could talk about. That's a whole nother interview topic right there. But being somebody who got a degree in education, and my dream was to be a high school basketball coach and to be a teacher and to be in that field for a couple of years and kind of fall into this career path. I can't say enough about how the important the local schools are. And then we had some comments in here talking about sports and rec, public recreation, YMCA. I can't emphasize enough how important those are for not only communities, but if you're watching this, you're listening to this, and you're trying to get in, you're trying to get an opportunity to do something within sports or sports and rec, you need to think about where are those opportunities going to be and what are most sports opportunities. They're at the youth level, because just like Andy mentioned, 1%, 2%, 3% of kids are going to go on and play at the college level. And then where Cassidy is now, that's the next level up. Like what's the percentage of being a college football player to now playing in the NFL? They get smaller and smaller. So where's the biggest pool? The biggest pool is at the youth level. So if you want to get your hands in sports and something that you're passionate about, if you can look at the local rec departments, the community centers, the YMCAs, and see how you can, whether it's apply for a job, do any type of volunteer work there to start to build some connections and get your foot in the door, that's a great opportunity for you to get an idea of what that career might look like. And I will also tell you this, if you're trying to go that route, and I work hand in hand with different facilities as far as renting some of their gyms out to run some of my camps. If you're trying to go into that, but you don't really like working with kids or parents, you're going to need to rethink some of the things that you want to do. But if you like sport, you like working with kids and parents, now you give yourself a huge opportunity, because that's a huge pool of people that you're allowed to work with and serve.
I love every bit about that answer. There's certainly some trends there that you're living into, Steve. So I appreciate that. We have another question.
Chad, can I also add a little bit to that, please?
Sure.
Yeah, because thinking about, the rec side, I didn't talk too much about this, but I was heavily involved in officiating for a little bit after I left Hope. And when I started out at Western, I wanted to get plugged in, to get some money, but also to just, get involved with the community at Western. So I became an IM official there. And then as I kind of came out of that, got back into Grand Rapids, I was like, well, I want to continue officiating. Andy got into MHSAA because yes, they need female officials, especially in those sports like basketball and whatnot. So got it plugged in there, but then additional, those things transition, right? They just transition. So, high school coach said, yeah, well, I would love for you to actually coach with me. So officiating turned into being a coach. And with the YMCA, I'm happy you brought that up. Working and officiating, yes, grown adult men, and they're adult leagues, right? That's daunting, but it's fun. It's fun. And that transition into a board opportunity, right, at the YMCA. So just certain things, right, you would never think about. To answer your question, right, yes, the rec level is a great entry point. It's a great entry point just to getting into a lot of different avenues and building your career up.
GT, are you still officiating?
No, I'm in Chicago.
We got to get you back in Michigan and officiating. And everyone not here I'll send you information to become an official. We need everyone.
Hope College could do an entire alumni panel on officiating and all the benefits that can provide. And certainly the MHSA, I'm sure, would support that in major ways. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Chiki. That's maybe an often forgotten route into being a part of the sport industry that has great need for positions. We have another question in the Q&A that has to do with athlete well-being. And so, Cassidy, maybe we'll have you answer this one. We get to see all these guys on Sundays. We get to see them in pads. We get to see them as warriors. You're dealing with them as people. What can you share with us about the ways in which you see a different side of athletes and how much well-being plays into that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that I think is often overlooked because we do see, especially NFL players, we see them in their prime on Sundays, suited up playing the game, but we don't think about all of the work that goes into behind the scenes, the Monday through Saturday grind to do that. And this year, I think especially, we really saw the impacts of isolation on players because they weren't able to go into their facilities as often. Even they were doing meetings from home, Zoom meetings. They weren't able to meet with each other and just be in that group of community except for practice. And even then they were, 6 feet from each other in their cafeterias and getting meals to go, eating meals in their cars. We have so many programs that we, try to get the word out to players even more because we know that if you're healthy off the field, you're going to be healthy on the field. And I think, there's so much to say about mental health, physical health. I think this past year, mental health has been a huge one for us. And it's one that there's been a lot of stigma around, especially in the professional sports world. But you saw guys like Dak step up and say, hey, my mental health is not okay right now. And then that caused some other guys, Solomon Thomas from the 49ers, is a big advocate for that as well. Hayden Hurst plays for the Falcons. He came out and said, hey, I actually tried to commit suicide. Like, you think that these guys are at the top of their, as high as you can get, but you don't think about all the consequences on the other end. So we try to put as many programs in place as we can. We have mental health resources. We have wellness resources, financial wellness too, knowing that if all of those other areas are healthy, then the players will be too. We also reach out to players' families. We offer resources for their spouses because we know they need to have healthy home environments in order to succeed. So, I mean, it's very similar to, I'm sure, the athletes on this call who know what it's like to study and have to study for their tests and do all their schoolwork and prepare as an athlete to be at the top of their game. It's challenging. So it's really getting a healthy environment and resources around them and then encouraging them to actually use those resources and not have any stigma around using them.
We so often understand youth sport and we see kids as kids within youth sport and we see them as people, and yet at the upper levels so often we don't see them as people for what they truly are. So some of the work that you guys are doing is wonderful and much needed and probably long overdue, to be honest. This filters down to the college level as well. And Jiki, it seems to be the trend that college athletic departments are augmenting their compliance offices with offices of or people in positions to help student athletes with their well-being. What were some of the trends that you had a chance to see at Western and at Grand Valley related to student athlete well-being?
Yeah, at the time when I was there, COVID wasn't even existing at the time, but students are dealing with a ton of stressors all the time, and some that we will never know about because they're just not comfortable bringing them to us. But you got to make sure that you continually remind students of the resources and all the support. So if they're not comfortable going to coach, right? And somehow you're able to recognize that, you kind of usher them in into the direction that makes sense for them. So a lot of campuses have, and especially athletic departments will have those resources, like psychology resources, just different support, small groups, things of that sort. But at the same time, you really, as a student athlete, also know where your limits are, right? I remember for myself, just going hard, right? Like, this is what I have to do to be the best. I'm doing this for my team. But just drilling myself further and further into just like getting away from the excitement of the game. So at the same time, pulling yourself back as a student athlete and saying, is this fulfilling for me? Do I need to take a step back? Where can I build, or exercise different parts of myself that don't have to do with the game, right? So my heart, my faith, my mind, what can I continue to build on to make sure that I'm all together good? And then of course, just balancing that with trusting others, bringing others in, allow them to support you at the same time.
Sounds like a holistic model that Brandon was talking about as well. How cool that resonates with what he said. I thought this was going to be a good panel. I thought there was going to be good answers, and I've been blown away tonight by the level of insight here in such different ways. We have such a diverse panel in terms of their skills and their experiences, and yet we can draw some common themes from this. But I've so appreciated the different ways that you guys have approached what you're doing and how well you've done all of this. And I think it might be a good way for us to end with each of you sharing a little bit of advice for our audience, knowing that the audience is comprised of students, current students, as well as alums and others who might be interested in navigating through the sport industry as a profession in some way, shape, or form. So maybe just a moment from each of you, a little bit of advice that you can give to the group. Steve, can I start with you? A little bit of advice for us.
Yeah, so as I read the PDF that got sent out and some of the topics on here, networking is obviously very important, and it's a buzzword in any type of work. But for those of you that are, especially if you're introverted like myself, and I got to get up to do this because I don't feel like talking to you guys right now. Like, it's not in me, right? So for those of you that are like, how do I network when it's so uncomfortable for me to network and to get out and do some of that? When that is very, very important. Listen, we all have some sort of connection to anybody. That's probably how you got interested in this area anyway, is somebody in this area that does something cool and you're like, man, that'd be cool. I want to do that too. So think first about who are you connected with and how can you try to serve them? And then I think as Cassidy and Jiki possibly mentioned earlier, like, out of that initial conversation that you may have with somebody, then you can ask for some contacts or some other people that they might be able to refer you to. But don't feel this pressure on yourself to go out and reach out only to all these people that you have no idea who they are. There's somebody that needs your help right now. You got to find that person. You got to go help them. All right. And add value to them. And then the last thing that I will say is, if you can get comfortable with people telling you no, you're going to get farther faster than everybody that gets hung up on it. Okay. Because I'm sure everybody else on the panel has tried to do something and somebody's been like, nope. Or you have this idea, and I know because I try to help basketball coaches, specifically high school basketball coaches. I'll go, Coach, I think we can do something here. And they're like, nope, I'm good. I got a choice. I can get hung up on it and try to convince them, which is only going to push them farther away. Or I can say, who are the people that do want my help? And it's this other coach. And he's like, Steve, come on, man. I need you to watch some game film for me and come work with my team this summer. Well, heck yeah, man. Let's go. I'm on. So don't get hung up on people saying no. It's okay. It's part of the deal. It's part of life. And push that aside and say, who are all the people that I can help, that I can serve to help find my passion, my purpose for life. And then let's roll.
I love that answer. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it. Cassidy, what do you got for us?
I don't know how I can follow that. That's excellent advice. I've been told no so many times. I think the thing for me that I've been really focusing and realizing lately is being an advocate for myself. You have to be an advocate for yourself at all stages and in all places of your life, right? Like, as much as we our professors help us and our parents guide us along. There's some point where you just have to speak up if something isn't working for you, if something isn't serving you, if something is uncomfortable. You just need to speak up and be an advocate for yourself. I think a lot of times, especially when we're just trying to put ourselves out there, it can be uncomfortable to talk about ourselves and our experience. And we kind of want to, we want to play the humility card. But if you're going to break into the role and into the field that you want, you have to stand up for yourself and say, hey, I'm really good at this. This is what I'm great at. This is why I would thrive in this role. And people will recognize that. So I think it's important to really let your skills shine. Talk about what you love doing, talk about why it's a passion for you, and then be an advocate once you're in that role. So if you get into a job that you thought was going to be amazing, and then you're having some issues or some conflicts, speak up about that and have conversations with people around you, because there's nothing worse than not saying anything and let it boil inside of you and kind of let it just sit there. If you speak up 9 times out of 10, it's going to be so much easier and so much better for everyone around you to just have a conversation. So be an advocate for yourself in all aspects.
Cassidy, you're a model, living that out. Your story shows us how well you've done that. Thanks so much for sharing. I appreciate it. Jiki.
Great advice, y'all. Keep it short and simple. Follow up. Just follow up. So whether it's a text, a call, an email, a handwritten letter. Yes, I'm young, but I'm all about the handwritten letters. So whatever it may be, follow up. That will set you apart. I'm sure, Andy, you've got a lot of students reaching out to you wanting to have coffee, right? But the one that follows up, you remember them. They're the latest in your inbox. So yeah, just make sure you follow up just to show your gratitude, appreciation. It goes a long way.
Oh, thanks, Jiki. Saying yes and saying thank you, right? Andy, finish us up here.
Well, it's hard to go fourth. You guys took all the best answers, and they're all spot on. And I guess I'll just bring it back to the beginning. Volunteer, intern, network, reach out, find an email, send a bunch of emails. Someone's going to respond and give you that 15 minutes on a Zoom. And I always tell people too, like when you get a school project and you can do whatever you want, and whether it's communications field, psychology, whatever it is, make it some kind of sports project. Force yourself to reach out to someone in the community to interview them for this project. Maybe that's your in. You're not seeking a job. You're hoping someone can give you 5 minutes to on a Zoom to answer some questions. So maybe that's your way to kind of slide in and potentially open up to others. But all great advice by the panel here, and the jobs are out there. You have to fight for them.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Andy. I would say if a student wants to do a project on sport, they would certainly find that the Director of General Education, myself, would be very excited about taking a look at a project like that, working alongside them. So, hey, thanks so much to the panelists. This has been an unbelievable session, and they've all shown a great willingness to continue the conversation with any of you that are interested. I wish we could give you a round of applause in person. Unfortunately, we can't. We so appreciate the time that you guys have spent in. We're so proud of you guys as Hope graduates. Hope that you continue to do well and love on others, leading and leading lives with service at the forefront as well. Thanks so much for all you guys are doing. We really appreciate it. And to the audience, we hope you've been able to take some things away from this tonight. Please feel free to reach out, follow up with some of these people, ask more questions, and follow all the advice they've given tonight. So on behalf of Hope College's Board Richter Center, we are so thankful for tonight, so grateful for the time that the panelists gave us. We hope everyone has a wonderful night.
Thank you.